Welcome to the Sales Leader of Influence show. For sales leaders who lead with soul, spirit, and spine. In a world obsessed with tactics, this is the show for those who know leadership is personal. And here's your host, Bernadette McCLELLAND.
And welcome to another week of the Sales Leader of Influence show. And how fast do these weeks go? Seriously. This week, I want to speak to you about a couple of concepts. I want to speak to you about state and strategy, and I want to throw a couple of stories in there as well. And we have, or some of us may not have heard of it, but some of us may have heard of a mantra or a cliche that was spoken by a very well-known guy, and that cliche was, change your state, change your life. And of course, I'm speaking about a man who is known as Tony Robbins, Anthony Robbins. So today I'm going to share some concepts around state and strategy, but I'm also going to, I guess, be a little bit provocative because I'm going to negate that mantra, because I don't believe that changing your state can actually change your life. But a little bit more about that later on. First, I want to share the story about how I did get to work as Anthony Robbins' resident coach for Asia Pacific. And so there is a message inside this story as well. And so a number of years ago, it was not long after my husband and I had gone bankrupt. And I had just laid most of the money that we had managed to squirrel out of our business into a diploma in coaching. So we had a choice. What do we do with this money? Do we keep it under the mattress or do we invest it in myself? And of course, investing in your own learning and development, you can never go wrong by doing that. And so anyway, I had seen this advertisement on the internet, and it was for a free coaching session by Anthony Robbins. And of course, it wasn't him personally, but I took the offer up, and it was a guy called Steve. And so at the end of this half hour, Steve was the salesperson, and I eventually engaged in a coaching contract. And so it was halfway through and probably a few weeks into it, and I was making my son's lunch in the kitchen one morning, and my husband came in and he said, there's a guy on the phone from America. And Steve wasn't my coach. I was actually being coached by Cynthia, and I took the phone and I'm like, Steve, what are you doing calling me? And he said, Tony has just reached out to us, and Cynthia and I think that you would be an amazing candidate to be one of the 20 coaches that Tony wants to come on board. And I said to Steve, you've got to be joking. I said, my homework yesterday from Cynthia was to write a manifestation letter. Now, at the time, I had never heard of a manifestation letter. And the manifestation letter, the homework, was for me to go into the future, 12 months into the future, and write this letter as though I was in the future and the previous 12 months had already happened. And my last paragraph in this letter said, Tony Robbins had just rung me to congratulate me on an awesome year and asked me to be his coach for Australia and New Zealand. So I said to Steve on the phone, you have got to be kidding me. And I said, come with me into my office. So I walked him into my office on the phone and I read that paragraph out to him. Now I knew there and then that whatever hoops I had to jump through, that role was mine. And it was. And so what I'm saying here is that the next part of this journey was an interview with the coaching director a few weeks later. Now, I had walked around the block a number of times that morning before my 7 a.m. appointment, and I got in state. I, at that point in time, wasn't really following Tony Robbins, but I had a couple of pirated CDs and I had a secondhand book called Awaken the Giant Within that I had got from a secondhand bookstore that still had the $1 sticker on it. And I had walked around the block a number of times with the mantra, everything you have is within you now. So when I got on that call, I was totally in state. A few weeks after that interview, I got confirmation that I was on the team. So yes, getting into state for any type of execution of whatever strategy you want to run or implement certainly does work. However, and this is where my, I guess, a little bit of controversial negation of this concept I'm going to throw in, because we can be in environments where we are in peak performance, whether it is a sales kickoff, whether it is some kind of Tony Robbins conference, where it is with a group of people that make us feel that we are on fire. And as human beings, we can leave that environment and we can rubber band back to whatever state we were in before. And here's what I think, especially in the world of business today, in any kind of environment that we're in today, because it is so uncertain, it is so volatile, it is so non-linear today, that our challenges are so much bigger, they are so much more messier than they have ever been before. It is so much harder for us to control our emotions in the moment. And so for us to be able to say, hey, let's just change our state and we can change our life, I think is Pollyanna. And so I think today we have to think a little bit different. And so I want to share with you today 3 concepts or 3 principles that are very aligned to what Tony talks about, but I want to take it a little bit deeper. And so what I think in sales leadership is that a lot of leaders, a lot of managers today, or a lot of leaders think that they may be able to manage their team's states, and that they may think that they can manage the way that their teams show up, when in actual fact those leaders struggle to manage their own states. And things happen that are out of their control. Some things happen that are in their control. And really, the energy of that leader is what is shaping their team. And so as leaders, we need to be really cognizant of our energy. And you'll hear me talk about that a lot. And that whole energetic way that we show up is something all of us, and not just in the sales leadership space, but this is something that I believe that is almost the secret sauce that is missing so much, which is why at that level, the tactics and the knowledge is less and less important today. And it's still important, but what is underneath all of that, I believe, is going to be more of a driver today than ever before. We've got AI that is absolutely shouting from the rooftops, but what is being silenced, and I think will come to the fore even more, is the ability for us at that level of driving our own wisdom and our spirit and our soul and our spine, and just really getting into the nuts and bolts of our identity. And so this is what is going to really I think, start to rise. And as leaders, we need to tap into that part of us. And so your sales team are not just going to follow what you say, they are going to follow who you are. And this is what I really want to start to drill home. And yes, state is part of this. And that whole change your state, change your life, it's change your identity, not necessarily change who you are, but start to look at who you need to become. And so this is where this whole deliberate disruption premise and philosophy that I speak about, because just changing your state is not enough. We need to start rewiring everything about how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And so I want to start to kind of help you look at your identity, because your identity is going to drive your level of influence. And so not your stress. And so we really want to reduce that stress, and we want to elevate your influence. And so what I've created is the pyramid. So I want to take you through these three factors, and it is physiology, it is philosophy, and it is the actual. I always get this word mixed up. I say physiology, philosophy, which is the heart of wisdom, and psychology. I've got to be very, very careful there. Psychology. And psychology is the decision making. So we're going to start by looking at physiology, which is your movement. And this is energy. And so the body itself, and I want to share, when I first went into sales, when you look at physiology, when I went into sales, I was told that I didn't have what it took, that I was too nice, I wasn't aggressive enough, and it was in my first couple of weeks in sales. And of course, they gave me all the data counts. And I went into, it was the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, and they didn't have Xerox, and it was the general manager, and he said to me, I want you to go back to Xerox, and I want you to tell Manager X and Manager Y that it's about bloody time they put somebody on my account that had a bit of enthusiasm. Now, I got 35 Xerox copiers at the time. Now, from a physiology perspective, I'm naturally enthusiastic. And so he had used the word enthusiasm. Now, I wore that as a badge of honor. I'm now validated. I'm now, oh my God, like, this is me. I'm enthusiastic. I've got it. Like, and so from a movement perspective, from a body perspective, I now lent into this physiologically. However, as I got more and more experience as a salesperson and my contacts got higher and higher, the C-level don't want somebody in their room that's enthusiastic or that's gregarious. And so from a physiological perspective, I started to read the room, and I needed to shift. And so what I would do was, when I was in downtown Melbourne, my trigger would be when I walked through the glass doors of the buildings downtown. As I pushed my hand into the glass doors to open those downtown buildings, what did I do? I would ground myself. I would drop my shoulders. My voice would drop. I would physiologically move into a totally different frame. And so I would enter those C-level meetings as a different version, a different posture. Now, 10, 15 minutes into the meeting, I would start to become enthusiastic again, but not to the level I used to be. And so what I'm saying here is your body will broadcast leadership before you ever say a word. And here is the thing, the congruence has got to be real, and it cannot be fake, because when you are saying one thing but your body is broadcasting another, that incongruence is going to repel people. There is an energetic transfer that is picked up by people. And so this whole energetic transfer is real. It is real. And this is going to become more and more evident as AI and as this becomes more and more. And so as a leader, if you are walking into a room and you are able to become more mindful, if you are able to ground yourself more and more, if you are somebody who is able to breathe and really become that future version of you and step into that energetic part of you before you walk into any kind of a meeting with your team, they are going to pick up on that. And then they are going to feel more aligned, more relaxed, compared to the leader that says they're relaxed but are so manic and chaotic. So I really want you to consider your movement, your body, your breath, your calm or chaoticness. So I hope that story kind of paints a picture for you, because my level of influence was clearly impactful at that point in time when I was a trainee, but my level of influence reduced as I went higher up the chain of decision maker until I read the room. And so as leaders, you may be at a higher level of influence as a leader, but you also have got to read the room of your team. So the second principle I want to share is that of philosophy. Now, philosophy, as I said before, is the heart of wisdom. And philosophy is all around meaning. And meaning is the meaning that we put on events that have occurred in the past. And being human beings, we rubber band back to the past all the time. But really, the past, is there really why? Like, we really only have right now. And the past has no bearing on where we are right now. And so it's irrelevant. And the future is even irrelevant. And so when we think about the past, it's a belief system that we have. And so our results are shaped by the meaning that we put on events that have happened in the past. And so these stories that we make up contribute to what we think is real, when in actual fact it's not. And I don't know if you've had any readings or read any of Byron Katie's work. And she has 4 questions, and 2 of them are brilliant questions. One of them is this true? And so whatever the meaning is that you are putting on something, is this true? And the other one is, who would you be if you didn't believe this? And so I want to bring it back to the next part of my journey with Tony Robbins, and that is the next part of it, which was flying across to Long Beach, and the 20 of us coaches that were in the 2-week training program. And so there were 10 of us on either side of the room, and down the back of the room were the directors and the trainers. And so we had to be tapped on the shoulder when it was our turn to go up and play coach and client back to back, because back then it was Skype. We didn't have Zoom, so we weren't able to see each other when we were coaching our clients anyway. And so me looking directly across the room at one of my colleagues across the room, and did the old, grimace like we did at school, and looking at each other going, geez, I wonder when we'll get picked. And at that point in time, I got tapped on the shoulder, which meant I wasn't listening, and I missed the segue. So it was my turn to go up and continue the coaching. Because I missed the segue, I missed what was supposed to be said. So when I got up there, it was an absolute disaster. And we stood up at the end of that coaching call to take feedback. And from the back of the room, the insults came. This was the worst coaching call we've ever seen. How embarrassing, Bernadette. And I stood there. And I just stood there with my shoulders back, talk about physiology, and I took it. And I said, thank you. And I sat down. Nobody would look me in the eye. It was really embarrassing. And the meaning I put on the fact that everybody got called out of the room over the next 2 days except me, the meaning I put on that was that I was going to be sent home and I had failed. And 4 people failed. I didn't. And the feedback, when I asked why wasn't I called out of the room, the feedback was, you didn't need to get called out of the room, Bernadette. Everyone was being called out of the room to be given feedback. You didn't need to be called out of the room because we gave you feedback and you showed the room how to take feedback. You stood there physiologically with your shoulders back, grounded, and you said thank you. So the meaning I had put on that was that I was going home as the big bad loser. So when we look at from a philosophical perspective, when we look at the meaning, what is the meaning that you are putting on as a sales leader when you don't make budget? Because there's 2 types of leaders. One is that we've got the worst team and, we've failed. And, I'm a loser. I'm not good enough. And that type of meaning that you are putting on you and your team is going to drive micromanagement. It is going to drive fear. And it's going to eventually drive stress and burnout. Whereas another leader can have exactly the same result, and they can look at that and they can say, okay, there's data there, that's feedback, and what can we look at? Because there is always an entry point. If you look at a situation, a circumstance, there is always an opening somewhere, always an entry point where you can find something. You can find a gap that you can say, okay, there's something there that we can grab hold of and that perhaps we can pivot off. Or perhaps we can look and we can go down another rabbit hole and we can go vertical. Because we can no longer look at continuing to go in a linear fashion. We've got to grab hold of something. I mentioned before my husband and I went bankrupt. And people say to us, how did you get through that and still keep smiling? And it's like, well, we looked for something, we weren't failures. For the first time in our life, we were debt-free, and that's what we grabbed hold of. We reframed. So there's always a reframe somewhere. And so from a philosophical perspective, what is the meaning that you are placing on things? So that is principle number 2. And principle number 3, the word that I struggled with, is psychology. And psychology is the mechanics. And when I'm talking about mechanics, I want to share a story that happened yesterday, because the mechanics, the psychology, is all around how you decide. And how you decide is all around choice. And, a couple of weeks ago, the episode that I shared with you was all around the third door. And the third door is around deliberate disruption, as opposed to distraction and default. And we talked about the waiting room. And so this whole concept around mechanics and around decision is where leaders will evaluate and they'll choose. And so mechanics, yesterday I took my car to the mechanics. I cannot believe that the story I'm telling you is actually aligned to the mechanics of psychology. So I took my car yesterday to the local mechanics to have an oil change, like seriously an oil change. My husband's interstate, and I get the mechanics to call him because I've got no idea about that kind of mechanics. And Tim rings me and he says, so guess what the damage is? $500, $600? $6,000. And he said, but we can have it done for a couple of thousand less if we get a second-hand part. This is turbo stuff, like turbo engine stuff. I don't even know what it's about. But anyway, turbo engine stuff. And so we could get a refurbished part. Now, I'm putting this whole physiology, philosophy, and psychology together. Now, it's like I took a breath, grounded myself, no emotions, stayed calm, and we decided that we would do the full 6,000. We just trusted the universe here. So here's where our thought process went. It's like, okay, quite calm about it, grounded. And from a philosophy perspective, this is where I reminded myself that the reliability mattered more than the short-term savings. And I thought to myself, I can get places faster, I can see more people, and guess what? I might make more money. And so this is where we thought. And from a decision-making perspective, it was risk versus certainty. And that was it. It won't be ready for another week. Did it take us by surprise? Absolutely. But it was not an emotional decision. We had reached a place of neutral thinking. Neutral thinking. And this is totally alignment with body, with beliefs, and with decision. And so where I'm taking you here is that when those 3 areas are aligned, our choices become effortless. And there's no stress. There would have been a time where $6,000 is like, what? But we have really decided to choose to be the kind of people where we want to align to effortless. And this comes back to deliberately disrupting the way that we think, feel, and act. And so when you are aligned, you are calmer. When you are not aligned, you stay stuck and reactive. And it's a deliberate choice. Does it take work? Yes, it does. But it means you change the meaning of things. And I'm telling you now, it gives you more clarity. This is what doing the work is all about. And it's doing the internal work. And as leaders, when you can do this, your team will look at you and they will feel it. And when they feel it, they will go out into the field and your clients and prospects will feel it. This is what I'm saying. So this is not about managing. This is about self-mastery. And so I guess this is what I wanted to share with you today. This is all about your identity meeting influence. And this is what the sales leader of influence is all about. It's not just about the hard skills. It's about you coming to the table and positioning yourself as a sales leader of influence so that ultimately your presence is leading you, your team, the business, and the greater community. And so I would love to suggest to you that if you want to, take a look at the Sales Leader of Influence diagnostic, check where your level of influence goes as far as your sales leadership. Go to the Sales Leader or salesleaderofinfluence.com and have a play. Look at the diagnostic and see where you sit across the 5 layers of sales leader personas. And touch base with me anytime. Ask me any questions. Jump on board LinkedIn. I'm always there to answer questions behind the scenes. Just shoot me a message and more than happy to chat to you. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this. Share any insights with me and look forward to speaking with you this time next week on the Sales Leader of Influence show. Bye for now.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching the Sales Leader of Influence show with your host, Bernadette McCLELLAND. See you next Wednesday live at 5 o'clock Eastern.